I can't say that it's easier. It's a lot of work, because if you're doing it the way that you really should and you're collecting data with the kids and helping to personalize, it's going to be a lot of work. If it's easier for you, I'm concerned about whether you're doing it correctly. I've heard some teachers that are saying, well, they create everything for their students and they have them on their technology and then they pretty much sit back. And so it's easier for them. But I always question, are you really doing what you're supposed to do for your students? Perfect for a substitute? It can be if the substitute knows how to do, and understands it and knows how to help the kids with the technology. Otherwise, it can be a nightmare. First year I ever did this, I thought, oh, well, I'm going to have, this was third grade, I'm going to have the kids do this. And, I was out and I put everything in Google Classroom. And the substitute said it was a disaster because she had no idea what was going on. For a substitute, it was not the best thing. And then that misconception is, just add some technology to what I'm already doing, and that's blended. So the technology needs to be something that is going to work with higher level thinking skills. So I liked it because it was good. We're always asking, how are you differentiating in instruction? How are you formally assessing? How are you collecting data to drive the instruction and provide for student choice? Integrate technology. So, we're always asked to do that, and this blended learning helps you achieve all of that. So the impact for the teachers, for me, I was more structured with my lessons, and I got equal time with each group. I used that data more frequently, and it was more effectively to use for personalizing the learning. I used to go to data meetings, and I was nervous because I really didn't have what I was supposed to have. I mean, how am I going to talk about this student? Once I started doing this and using the tools to help collect that data, I felt very confident to talk about each of my students. It's easier to meet the needs of your students. You can allow for more student choice, and it really helps fill in the gaps with regards to things that you might miss, because you can meet with the students more often. When you're doing whole class instruction, there could be some kids that are just missing the stuff, and you're going on to the next skill, and they're really not getting what they need. So it really helped me. And the students can track their own progress. They set goals for learning. There's this learning environment that you're providing for them for representation, engagement, and expression. And so I want to talk to you, or give to you planning stages. So how do you get started with all this stuff? So you should have, if you're in the presentation, I hope the QR code worked and everything for you. There's a planning sheet here. There's a link to it. And this I used with some teachers that really helped them get started with it. Because these are all the things, after I had done it for the first year, I thought, I went back and I wanted to...
It says we need permission. Yeah, it won't let us access it.
You're kidding me. So I'll change that. But it looks like this, where you can start your planning. And I have 3 different sections. So this would be how you're really going to get started with it. And I'll take you through with some other slides. The yearly time frame, and you can tell I'm a list maker and do planning. And then this was even one-line tools for blended learning when you get to that point, and set up by SAMR and set up by the rotations you might use, if it's something that you would use. Obviously you don't have to, you can do your own thing, but this part on the left-hand side was very helpful for a couple of my colleagues who wanted to get started with that. And they said, especially with the management of it, there's so much stuff that you don't think about when you actually have to do this. Depending what grade level you're teaching and where your kids are prior to that, the management could be a little easier, it could be a little harder for you. So you start out with, what subject you're going to choose. If you're secondary, you may already know your subject. If you're elementary, start with the one you feel most comfortable. And a lot of elementary teachers, are already with the reading, have the guided reading groups. So you already are set into that rotation. It's just a matter of now changing things up and making it a little bit more personalized for your groups, because a lot of times those groups then are also leveled by reading level. So you can then start to take a closer look at what you're doing as far as the reading materials that you are presenting to them, and then now how can I start to collect data for that, etc. So it really depends what you know, what level you are, what subject area. I started with math. I was doing everyday math, and that has the lesson plans for you already. But does anybody do everyday math? The everyday math is, it didn't work as well as I wanted because it cycles those skills back and over again every day, which is not a bad thing, but the way it was set up, it was a little bit difficult. But I made it work, and I was glad that I got to do it because I really met the needs of my kids so much better than whole class. And then reading, I had worked with that and really, again, got a lot going on with the reading. Now the science, as far as that goes, I did a little bit more whole class for science because it just fit better to do that. But they would do labs, you know, in rotations. So you have to consider your students, which you do anyway. Every time you get your class list, you take a look at, you know, I know what subject I'm teaching. Now I'm going to see what students I have, and do I have ESL kids? Or do I have learning support? Do I have kids that will be going to seminar? You start to look at the levels. And so this is where you want to, when you start your planning stages, to meet with the learning support, the reading specialists, and let them know this is what you want to do, and you know, you will need their support. And then of course, check with their schedules and make sure that you mesh those so that they can come in when you might need their support the most, or they might have an assistant that comes in and can work at that time. So we also need to know what is the prior knowledge of our students. So if they've never done anything with rotations, you have to start training them. Do they know much of technology? If you have a school where they've come, you know, you do a lot of technology and they've come before you with that, you're not going to have as much to do. There's a lot of things that you may have to teach them though. So when I did this 4 years ago with the third graders, they didn't have much. So I had to take a lot of time to get it up and running. I thought, I'm going to get this up and running by October. That was my goal. Well, it was January, because I didn't realize I had gone from 5th grade down to 3rd, and I didn't realize, you know, and factor in the amount of time it was going to take me to train them to actually do this. So then you're doing your equipment check. Even though, you know, you don't throw the technology in right away, you still have to think about that ahead of time when you're planning. So what do you have in place already? A lot of people think they need an interactive whiteboard, but you don't, depending what grade level, it's not really necessary. There are things that the desktop computer or your laptop, the projector, document camera, those are good things to have. And the headphones are necessary for the students for the independent group work that they do, so if they're watching videos. Then, you know, what devices do you have for your students? And again, it's not necessary. A lot of people think that all my students have to have a device. When I started, the district did give me 12, and that was not enough for even half of my kids. So I got 12 laptops for them, 12 Chromebooks. And so I made it work. And, you know, and then I realized as I'm going through this, they don't really need a device each time, because my collaborative stations, rarely ever did they have a device, because that's where I want them to speak to each other and not have their face in a computer. So they didn't need it then. But the where they did need it the most was the independent station. You also have to factor in, if you're giving, you know, a lot of secondary teachers will give them assignments at home. And you also have to take into consideration, do you have access to the internet? In my district, there are students that don't have access to the internet. So it doesn't work for them to give assignments unless you're doing paper and pencil. So you have to keep that in mind also. Now, as far as setting up any of the rotations or how you want to start managing your classroom, you may have heard, you know, a typical blended learning room, maybe the rotations of the independent, the direct, and the collaborative stations. You can do it any way that you want. You can start with, you know, just 2 groups. You meet with one group while the other group is doing something else. You can have 3 groups, you can have 4, you can have 5. So this is how I did it. I started with my opening in the whole class. So we would go over our agenda at that time and what was going to happen. And then we would split into, I would do my direct instruction, and the kids would be doing something collaboratively. I'm sorry, that was independent. I said direct instruction. And then the direct instruction. Now I do want to show on this, tell you on here, the teacher has her back to the students. You want to make sure you don't have your back to your students. And you want to position the kids where you can see their screens. Because there's, a lot of times they're going to be doing something that they're not supposed to do when you're not watching them. It happens. And then it would end it with the whole class. So it could be an exit ticket, just a couple minutes. Now I had, when I was teaching elementary school, I had chunks of time. And I know you don't have that chunk of time sometimes in other grade levels. So this was math, I had 90 minutes. Language arts, I always had plenty of time as well. But this could be over a couple days. It doesn't have to be in just one period. So this one is one that I added then, where it was an independent. So I was trying to add more to personalize the learning, give them more choice. So at the one where it's teacher directed, that's where I was collecting some data for them, and I was putting them on things like Khan Academy or readworks.org. So there I was collecting data, Edmodo Snapshot. And then the next one, the independent one, was where they had more choice. I didn't at the time, but you can throw in things like coding. So if they're doing something with coding, maybe that's something they're choosing. They set goals and, this is what I want to do when I get to this station, that kind of thing. So again, I just pretty much talked about what I had done, but that's that overview. Lesson for the day, guidance, and any of the online lessons. This is where you would do that mainly in independent. And then collaborative, and I can't stress enough that this is a place where the kids really need to talk to each other. So for my everyday math, there were always games that they were supposed to play, and I could never get to it when I was teaching whole class. So I did it here. And they actually were talking to each other about it, instead of we just didn't get to it. Or their math boxes. I always had them do their math boxes on their own, and then I checked them. Well, I changed it up, so they did their math boxes together, and they had to go back into the journal that the resource that they had and look up the information in order to answer it. And it was just so much more effective, and they just took more ownership in their learning. And then again, this could be something that you can do choice boards, extend the learning. They can practice skills if that's what they choose to do. I need to work on this, and this is what I'm going to do to work on it. And I put instead of PBL right there, I put projects. That's project-based learning as opposed to problem-based learning, because problem-based learning is a more extensive, takes a longer period of time. Project-based learning, it can be something that's in a shorter period of time. They can do in a couple days. And then just recap the whole lesson. So as far as then getting to an agenda to give to the kids, this is another thing you want to plan. So this is what a lot of mine looked like. Again, here's that whole class. Here's everything that I would be doing on the direct, collaborative, independent, and self-directed. And so those are the things that I would provide for them. Of course, I wouldn't have anything there unless there were links that I need them to get to. And then the closure and the exit ticket. And I could have links on there that they could get access. And I'll show you a couple examples of those in a minute. So again, depending on your students, whether you are just starting with, the kids have never done this before, they're not used to rotating, you really have to train them to do this. And I don't know if that link is going to allow you to, it's supposed to have you create a copy, but if it doesn't, I'll go back and change them all. I probably didn't do the sharing correctly. So you want to ask yourself now, how am I going to train my students? So you may already know the whole class, but that's a place now where you can start to model things. You can teach them how you're going to do this. And you can also teach them the technology as a whole class before you're expecting them to do that in any of the stations. Even some of the older kids, if it's a new tech tool, do it as a whole group and then go on with it. And then you're just working your way to a trial run of the rotations, if that's what you decide to do. And then, just follow the agenda, where to find that. My kids just wanted to go right down to the links, so they didn't even know how to read my hyperdocs that I had for them, or they just, oh, it's a link, I want to see what's there, and had no clue when they got to the link what they were supposed to do because they didn't read it. They just weren't trained to do that. So what if you were able to get into that link, were you able to get in and make a copy?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
No.
darn. So anyway, it looks like this. Again, it's just another thing for you to do to organize if you want, just a suggestion. But the step that you're going to do as, introducing the goals that you may have at that point, and then any notes that you would want to take for it. And I have some links in there for a place to manage passwords. That's for the younger kids too. So then, and again, this looks very primary-ish, but thinking about the bathroom breaks and going to the nurse, but that's again something, all the kids are going to leave the classroom when you're working with a group of students, and you just have to have those management things in place. Again, technology issues. So once you get with the technology and you're working with someone, you can't do it, get the kids to help you. And I had some, this was 3rd grade, I had my guinea gals, they were actually girls, and I expected the boys, because the technology was, because in the past that's the way it was. And now the girls were the ones that were the ones, I could train them, and then they would go help the other kids get signed up into some of the tools, and I didn't have to do a whole class for some of them. So that was helpful. And that was 3rd grade. So if you're teaching higher levels, they can easily do that. Planning for the lessons then. So you have to ask yourself, how are you going to fit the existing lessons into your rotation? So you look at your plan, what do you have? What are things that you can use? What do you want to retweak? What are things you eliminated? Maybe you just had it because it was a fun thing, but it really doesn't fit. Or this might be a time to add something that you could never get to. And then, of course, how are you going to have them complete the task, or that that they've completed? So you have to keep that in mind as well. So I like to use the Universal Design for Learning. And when you go to that link, and that should be a PDF, so you should be able to get into both of those. But it looks like this. And when I'm planning lessons, it talks about representation, expression, and engagement, and just have that beside me when I'm planning, and it helps me to think about different ways that I can provide the activities and the instruction to the kids. Bloom's taxonomy and the depth of knowledge. So it's another thing that you keep nearby, because once you get into this and do a little bit more, if you haven't done it or you're already doing it and you want to step it up a couple of notches, add some of this into it. And so I feel like I missed something. In there, in that link, that takes you to a site by Karen Hess, Dr. Karen Hess, and she has in there, you can click on for the different subject areas, and she has both of these things cross-referenced and gives you some ideas. So again, you are just asking the questions now as you're starting to think, using the Universal Design for Learning, knowing what you want to teach, and just asking yourself these questions. What are the best resources now? What can the kids do independently? How am I going to collect data here? How am I going to differentiate? What are the best resources? Is it technology or is it unplugged? Don't think that you have to use the technology all the time. And then as far as choosing some online tools, when you get to that point, again, you're going to be thinking about this even before you start getting this started, because you have to get some of these things in place. We use Google Classroom, or Google Apps for Education. You can also use Edmodo. I know some schools use Schoology. It could be a combination of both. But it's a place that the kids need to report to get their information and their digital agendas. So when you start thinking about your online tools that you want to use, think, are they appropriate for your kids? Depending on the age of your kids, are they COPA compliant? Is your district, okay that they are using that? Do you have classrooms that you have to enroll them in? Because it's something that you want to, in your management, you want to get them enrolled in that ahead of time. You know, there could be a day where you're saying, okay, I know I'm going to use these tools. I think I'm going to use a chunk of time to just get my kids into and signed up. And it's already done ahead of time. And then, you know, just keep in mind that the learning is first and the technology is second. So you always have that clear purpose. You know, the speaker yesterday was saying about the technology and you know the old school, and there's nothing wrong with that. If it is not something that, you know, if you're just throwing that technology in there for technology's sake, you probably shouldn't do it. But so just tell yourself, you know, if somebody asks you, say, I'm using this tool to accomplish this specific purpose for the students, and here is why. So if you can answer that question, then you've got a good tool that you can use. And then, you know, you're looking at the SAMR model also. That's another thing that you want to keep in mind. If it's just a substitution, probably not the best thing. If they really can do it using pencil and paper, maybe that is what you want to do. So some of the online tools to collect data that I've used that are free, and I have lists of these available too. Nearpod is one that I like. Now I have the full version of it, but you can do some of the stuff that is for free, and it does collect the information for you, so you have that to look at. You have your Google Forms, EndNote Snapshot. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is all based on the standards. It has language arts and math in there. I use that a lot. And the kids can see the results also. So that's a good thing for goal setting. You know, I want to make improvements in this area, so when they can see it, it's helpful. Readworks.org, Common Lit, I don't have on here, but Khan Academy, even Socrative, you've got that you can collect information. I did a lot of analyzing the data, because then when I did that every night, that I was collecting data, then I would reform the groups often and, you know, see what they needed and where the best place would be for them. Now, on this one, there's a curated list of online tools. Again, if I will go in and change these because I probably don't have them set correctly. But the general list is what I started years ago, and it's not in any format. It's just a list. It does have it connected to the different subject areas, and it says most of those are free. But I started doing when I was helping other teachers. I had them set up by Universal Design for Learning. So the tools for math and science and social studies and ELA, there's more to it, and then I have a lot of goodies down at the bottom as well. So don't forget this part, the digital learners. Your kids are going to be online, and the 9 elements of digital citizenship is connected to this. We don't have elementary librarians in our district. They've been gone for a while, probably 8 years now. And it's become a problem now that we're putting the digital or the technology in their hands, and they're not really doing what they're supposed to be doing as far as using them correctly and using them appropriately. So even if you have someone who's doing a structured formal lesson, it's all of our responsibility when we're putting them in the technology in their hands to reiterate what is taught to them and just continue to reinforce and remind them of how they are to use the technology. Because if you ever get to the point where you're doing back channels with the kids, even in Google Classroom, and you've got the comments and you're getting, what's up, you know, that kind of thing, and a whole like 1,000 exclamation points, that's not what they're supposed to be doing. So you have to teach them how to do that as well. I still get that at the junior high level. So my digital agendas are here, and there's links to those. And this particular one is a science lab. And I'll just take you through a couple of these. This one I had done where it was whole group, so I did a lot of whole group teaching, but then I wanted to have them do their collaborative groups, so they were going around to different stations. So I had done one of them. Here's one that was a video that I created, so I threw that in for them to watch the video. But they had done all of this on their own, and then this was provided for them, so they had all this information, and these were also at the stations. But then I also wanted them to show me what they knew. So I have different ways that they could do that. So I gave them some choice, and here's a choice if they want to make a video. And then I also have the rubric that I was going to use to evaluate and assess. So they had access to that. And when I shared it out through Google Classroom, they all get a copy. And I just go in and highlight the different areas, and they have it when I send it back to them. And you can comment through that. That was just, that was for science, and that was 3rd grade. I'm not exiting here. Oh, that's because I went like that. Sorry. I zoomed it in. I knew I'd have some kind of technical difficulties. Too good to be true, there it is. Sorry about that. And this one is, whoops, this one is one that I've actually done. I push into the classrooms for digital citizenship at the junior high level. I don't have a special. They don't come to me. But I make this is a hyperdoc. You may have heard of hyperdocs, but I like to put my information, or a blank on the right-hand side. It's just a table and a document. And put the blanks on the right-hand side where they can do the responding. So again, push it through Google Classroom, they all get a copy. But what I do is, because they don't see me every day, or even if they would and they were absent, I have a lesson overview of what the lesson will be about, and then how they would go through answering this. And I have screencasts in here that they can do on their own. Now, if I'm in the classroom doing it with them, I just take them through this, or they work with a partner, however. But I have everything in there for them. It takes a while to set this up, but it is nice that if they miss anything, they can get back into it. This was my math agenda for everyday math. So the kids had this, these were my groups. This was all differentiated based on these 3 groups. And there were sometimes I didn't even meet with the top group. They were doing things independently because they didn't need the skill. They already proved that they knew it. And then they knew what the rotations were for that. This one, when you're training the kids, this was something that I was doing where they had one sheet and they had to go through. This was actually a little farther in the training. It wasn't an initial thing, but just for them to learn how to go through and read the document and click on the links and do the activities. So they can do it with a partner first, so they can discuss everything, and then they're set to go on their own. And you're still going to have kids, depending on your kids and the age that you have. They may struggle with the independent, but that's nice to have a classroom helper. And then this is just one. I guess this is pretty much like the science again. Same thing, just the 3 groups this time, and they were doing the collaborative. I don't have any technology in there. And the independent, there's just one video, and then they had to respond to that. And in here I gave examples of what I wanted, same thing, and again you have the rubric at the end. So I found this that I want to share with you. These are better lessons. They have lessons all set up by collaborative, independent, teacher directed. It's a very good website to go. All the information is free there. You can use it, so it might be something that's valuable for you as you're getting started with this, or whether you've already done blended and you're looking for new ideas. And then, again, more information for you. If you're not in PLNs or PLCs, different personal learning communities, you want to start getting into some of those. And I like Discovery Education. And Web has, you can sign, if you're not familiar with that, you can sign up for all different kinds of communities that are going to suit your needs. Simple K-12, they have some, if you've heard of that, they do have some free online videos that you can, that they will have you, you can watch and join, but that's paid for. Edmodo has a lot as well. And then Catelyn Tucker, she's a guru on blended learning. Monica Burns has some things. You saw Alex Keeler, Richard Burns. Anything Google, Alex Keeler is guru on that. Eric Kurtz, if you're not familiar with it, is Control-Alt-Achieve. Excellent website for learning how to use Google and how you can use it in the classroom. Richard Byrne does free tech for teachers, so all the tools that he does are free, so I use him often, and he will also say how it relates and how it's usable for the classroom. And then Casey Bell is another one as well. So, thank you for attending. Do you have any questions? And there's the QR code again. I'll go back in and fix up those so you have access to those. Any questions about anything?
Eric's last name?
Eric Kurtz, and his website is Control-Alt-Achieve.
That link works.
I knew the QR code worked, but
Yeah,
it was the other ones I have to go in
And all
and
the
share.
links, yeah, it's everything that you did in a Google Doc.
Right, if the PDFs are fine,
Right.
it's the Google Docs, I
Google
forgot.
Docs.
So I'm sorry I was talking very fast, but if you have any questions, let me know. And if you're leaving, enjoy the rest of the day.
What is it? Definitely not the weather. Not the weather.
Dawn, is there any chance you can get back to your first slide with the Google link? That way it'll have both the QR code and the
Sorry, I'm doing it a slow way.
Yeah, I didn't look at it. It wasn't, it's personalized for you. For classroom, for instruction, but it doesn't look like anything. It's just like an intro. Yeah.
I am very close. Tell me to move closer. Yes.
That's what you're doing for lunch?
Probably, yeah, because my next one is at 2, so it's good.
Here.
Yeah, it's good. What are they doing?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave.
I said, because my phone on my bag.
Let's go look outside.
It was raining before. Like when we walked over here.
Came up by your classroom.
Yeah, my son is going to put just like
right out here, but
Yeah.
You might really match, but you might not get the signature for the bookie at that time when you're supposed to do it.
Your daddy does that.
There's always a place to put it in and it takes it from there. So I don't know, I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not there.
She says she's done with the first three. The next one.
Oh, okay, so she's.
So she's gonna date.
You made reservations for all the, for no, on two minutes there.
Sure. So I'm ordering pizza.
Well, it's most fun parts. Okay. Hey, especially when you're trying this kind of thing. So then this
Is there something over there?
I want to talk
To go over and like that? No. Is there something over there?
Right. And then they meet. Yeah, I would do that. Generally, people are successful.
Okay. Is there?
But this would be interesting to do if you wanted them to go this way.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay. So Princeton Hotel.
So benefit, they're not.
District Finance. Trading Sam Shaw
Yeah, there's a lot in there. It's just something that people want to take a look at.
What are you looking at now?
What is it?
Yeah, and I want to, I noticed, so I noticed when I was doing this, and I just like I said, I was helping.
I'm
Let's see what the tools are suitable for both elementary and. It's the same question. I noticed this before I was.
I really don't have enough bears.
Sure.
When's it going?
Around and went up the bar.
Right. People.
And where's the worst case scenario?
Yeah. I can still be where I am. Not just the day.
I forgot to put my bag.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is anybody still in this at all? I just wanted somebody to check to see if you can get to that,
I can if that is anyone.
yeah, that's the.
I can do it. I don't know, how do you, when you have a QR code, but like, I don't have a QR code reader on here, so I can't do it on my.
Do you have one on your?
No,
Just on your phone.
Yeah, I
I'll
just use
do-
my phone. Yeah, and then, back here, here's, this should be the shortened URL
No, okay.
that you can use if you need that. I'm sorry I talked so fast, I feel like that took 10 minutes.
No, you're fine. I'm just, I feel like I'm not familiar enough with Google Suite, whatever, to be able to. Okay, well, here I thought I had it, and now I can't even find it, so there you go. I'll probably wanna get to it and won't be able to find it when I get back. I made a copy of it, but where is it?
Has anybody been outside? Any ideas outside?
Oh, here it is. Okay, which, do you know
So
about which
follow
slide?
Yeah, it's not too far, it's with the management.
That's okay.
tonight, but Mary Ann is going to raise a presentation, and I'm going to
Laptop,
follow
so it's
with another blended learning, which are both.
Okay, make a copy, so hopefully that will, cause I think you, before we're getting
Right.
access,
Yeah.
you needed access, okay.
Yep, it's up.
Okay, good, thank you very much for
Sure.
sharing that.
Okay, this is, pass this one. I'm not going to pass those two. Alright, there it is, there it is. You're giving in, aren't you? Yeah. Yeah, I might have this. Yeah. I'm just tired of watching. You need the rest of it, right? Yeah, I'm tired of watching it. Wow. Not right now until, see, sometimes you ruin yourself before you even start. It's like, we're gonna get this the same thing, like, bam, right to, and like everybody else is there, like, well, wait, what about us, what about us, it's, yeah, it's just, it is an interesting camaraderie, and just a relationship. I don't know, I thought we can't, there's Blue Canvas for mine, but there's no Blue Canvas in Kansas, it's like away from it. And I don't think so. Like, I don't, I think Blue Canvas, like, there's something happening. And that's why she does that. And she'll say that. Yeah. I don't think she, I don't think, so I'm gonna go back to, I think, she had four Austin's Canada. That's true. Right. That's an option. That's an option too. Or, okay. Let's see if I put Mary in the following explanation. I'm going to follow which are both here. We'll see if I yeah. And I think for me, it's just why I always stay out of this. Yeah, but it's not something, I never know how to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. First time, I did have a position. Really? It's not called friendship. That's not friendship. What is my first name? That's fine. Alright, well, let's see what they have on here. Okay, sounds good. She mentioned music position, that's exciting for her. And that's how she is. Yeah, which we really need. I think it's gonna be a long wait. It might be. Well, we have a half, if we can say half hour. Yeah, we have a half hour. Yeah, we're not. All right, thank you. That was good.
Thank you.
I went too fast.
No, you did well. Oh, no, you did well. You have a lot of resources there, I'd say.
You did well, I put a good recommendation for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there are lots of great resources.
That's what, it can be overwhelming, and it's just one of these things that you can stand here and talk about it, and
Well, it's nice
you
that
just have to go back and have that
Yeah.
stuff to look
It's
at.
nice you gave so many different, I mean, my goodness, there's a lot in there, so
You spent a lot of time making
I
those.
can tell.
That intimidates me a little bit, like I feel like, oh man, I don't think I could spend that amount of time making all of that stuff. Like for every single,
Yeah, I like
doing this.
Mhm.
It's nice too the way you did it because people can modify things too to use it for themselves, so.
Well, thank you.
Good conference, yes.
Okay, now I just don't know what else I have here that I need to. Are you still in that? I just wondered if you would mind checking all those for me. I hate to ask you to do that because I know you're busy doing other things.
That's okay. Well, I'm just moving it all to one. Well, it must have, because it allowed me to move them all. It actually,
So you're putting them all in a folder.
I am.
Which I should have created a folder
So
with everything.
planning sheets. I don't know. I don't have 2 copies of that. But that's all.
You may have opened it twice, maybe, or maybe probably when you first opened it, and then I set access. I think that's why. So you can
And
always
I think
delete
it's the
those.
exact same. Yeah.
You can delete those.
Okay. So I'll delete that one.
And I just want to make sure you have access to these